Hey guys, what's going on? Sam Bosworth here. Today I'm going to be doing a video about how I got my diagnosis of CMT. This has been requested on the past couple of CMT videos I did for a sort of more in-depth, because I did mention briefly how I got diagnosed, but this is going to be all about how I got my diagnosis from when I first started noticing symptoms to when I got officially diagnosed. One thing I should have mentioned at the start of this video, and I'm just realizing now, and I do mention it later on, but it is that I live in the UK. So all of this information that I'm discussing was from the National Health Service here in the UK, which is free care, and how I was able to get a lot of my diagnoses done. And all the information I talk about and support systems I talk about are based here in the UK. There will be alternatives in the US, I'm sure, and maybe you can ask people for help about that in the comments. But anyway, on with the video. We'll get straight into it. Basically, when I was a kid, I didn't learn to walk until I was 2, so obviously my parents noticed there was something wrong there. So they started getting me to a doctor, and that led me to seeing a physiotherapist within my primary school for the first few years of primary school, that is. So that was sort of when I was, 4, 5, 6, I guess? I don't really know what year I started there. But basically they just said, it was growing, and when I grew up a little bit more, it would go away, because I had the high arches in my feet, obviously, as many people with CMT do. And I had trouble walking. But they said, you'll grow out of it, it'll be fine, try not to worry. Because they had no idea what it was, but either the doctor or the physiotherapist had never seen anything too similar to it, but they thought it was just something I was born with, and hopefully when I hit puberty it would sort of go away. Now, throughout primary school, I got really bad growing pains in my thighs, and I found out recently this is because of CMT, not something I knew at the time though, and I used to get such bad growing pains I couldn't go to school. I was in agony with them, and this is when I was probably about 8, 9, 10 years old. And I did go to the doctors, but they thought I was just exaggerating and making it up to get out of school and didn't really believe me, which sucked at the time because it was incredibly painful. But as I said, that is now, I know, down to my CMT. So basically I just had to put up with that until I got to puberty. And then when I was 13, 14, 15, things started to get worse. If you want to know more about that sort of thing, check my other 2 videos. I'll put them up in the cards over here. I think that'll be. When I hit puberty, my feet got a lot worse. I really struggled to walk. I didn't need crutches or anything at that time, but I was in a lot of pain, and my feet were both to the side, as I mentioned in my other videos. So this is where my journey to diagnosis sort of began. I went to my GP, who was fantastic at the time, and she referred me to the orthopedics at my local hospital, which wasn't in a big city at all. It was in a sort of town. Now, this wasn't a huge hospital. They didn't deal with a lot of people coming through, and obviously something like CMT was far beyond anything they'd dealt with before. I suppose if they dealt with someone like me in the past, maybe they would have known. But the guy I saw there was an orthopedic surgeon, and he didn't really have any interest in diagnosing me. He just wanted to fix the problems. So I had a million x-rays to look at my feet and sort of see what was going on, and they said that the growth plates, even though I was 13, had pretty much already stopped. They are sort of in control of how big your feet will grow, both lengthwise and such. So they said that my feet weren't going to grow any bigger. I was going to have roughly size 5 feet for the rest of my life, no matter how big I grew in height or weight. So that was obviously not fantastic. Now, they referred me at first to physiotherapy and to the orthotics place because they wanted to try and sort of see if just having some insoles in my shoes could help with the way I walked, and they did for a long time, and physiotherapy did help as well to keep the strength up in my lower legs. So when I got to 18, things were certainly getting worse by that point. I was really struggling to walk. I did use a stick every now and again, and if I was going to go anywhere long, where I'd be out for a long period of time, I did sort of get into a wheelchair, although I didn't use it as much then as I do now, which is pretty much daily if I go out to do really anything. So I went back to a different orthopedics guy because I moved house, and honestly the moving house to a big city was what pretty much changed everything as far as my diagnosis goes. I went to see this orthopedics guy, and although he didn't really have any interest in diagnosing me again, he took a bit of a better look, and he basically just said to me, 99% of people are born regular and normal, and you're just deformed. So that was lovely. Those were like pretty much his exact words. So I just assumed it was some kind of birth defect. There wasn't any kind of name for it. And I never really thought about the diagnosis of it, or what I might have, or if there were other people with the same problems. I knew I had arched feet, and there's a proper name for that. I think it's Carvus varus, or something along those lines. I can never remember. So, I'd sort of Googled that and had a look around and saw people with high arches like me, but never really thought anything more of it. Now, when I was between the ages of 18 and 20, I ended up dislocating my left knee 3 times, twice within the space of 2 months, and then once again later on. But basically, when I did it the first 2 times, I ended up in a full cast on my left leg. Now, when I had that cast on, I stupidly was able to kind of walk a little bit, like put weight on the left foot while I had the cast on. Meaning that my foot pretty much, because my leg was forced to be straight, which affected the curve of my foot, got even more stuck on the one side. And then 6 weeks later, when I eventually got the cast off, it meant that my foot was pretty much stuck like that and I could no longer walk. Even when I got past the physio of my knee and could bend my knee straight again and that sort of stuff got better, I just couldn't walk whatsoever. So I was confined to using a Zimmer frame because of my balance with my balance from CMT. I couldn't really use crutches when I had to completely weight bear and have no weight on one leg. So I used a Zimmer frame and obviously a wheelchair when I was out and about. Now, once that became clear that I couldn't walk, I got referred back to the orthopedics guy again. And he said, now is the time we're going to have to operate, otherwise, you're not going to be able to walk. So basically, I had 5 different operations on my left foot, but they did it in one go. Now, I mentioned this in my other videos, so sorry I'm rambling again, but basically they cut a triangular chunk of bone out of one of my feet to kind of, if that's your foot, they cut a triangle out here and then mushed it together kind of thing, so that it would straighten my foot out, and they stretched the tendon in my calf and all the rest of it, and that did help. I got back on my feet. But it became clear that there was obviously something more up than I was just a bit deformed or whatever. So once I got back on my feet and was sort of alright again, I got referred back to the orthopedics guy to check up on me and have x-rays. And this time when I had x-rays, the guy said it's time. I was referred to a different person in a bigger hospital in the city, and he said it's time to take you to a neurologist. And if you have CMT, this is one of the first steps you'll take in getting sort of a diagnosis and going for tests. So I went to my first neurologist, who I was lucky enough in my city was one of the best in the area, and he'd dealt with a lot of people in my situation before. But all this guy really did was sort of poke pins in the end of my feet to check how my reactions were, and I couldn't really feel them. I've still got feeling in my toes, but not fantastic, because obviously they're curved like most people with CMT. And he sort of checked the reactions in my knees with the hammer, and there's no reaction whatsoever. So he said, right, I'm going to take you to do 3 different tests. Now, the tests for CMT are as follows. First of all, you've got your basic x-rays, MRIs, and CAT scans, of which I had all 3. I had about 100 x-rays. I'm surprised I haven't turned into the Incredible Hulk, to be honest. As well as, I think I had 2 different MRIs, one sort of going up my legs, and then I think I had a CAT scan of just my feet. Now, after that, most people, I think, and certainly in my situation, have something called, and I'm reading this from my notepad down here, an electromyography, but it's more commonly referred to as an EMG. Now, what happens in an EMG, and this can be quite scary, but it honestly doesn't hurt that much, is they take your forearm, they put a needle somewhere on your forearm, and then they clip something onto the end of your finger, and they basically put a shock through the needle, and they record how long it takes that shock to react to your hand to kick up into the thing clipped on the end of your finger. Now, when I went to do this, what they usually do is they start at a low voltage and they rank it up slowly to sort of see what was going on, but with me, there was virtually no response on the low voltage, so they just turned it all the way up and shocked, and it did hurt, but it was literally for a millisecond, and you do get over it. And this is a vital test, because once they've done this, they can pretty much start to diagnose you with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease if that is what you have. After that test, they'll send you away, and obviously you'll have to wait for the results. And then what they do is, I got a letter saying I was to come in for some genetic testing. That's all it said. It didn't say what they were going to do. It didn't say what was going to happen. I googled it. I couldn't find anything online. But basically, all that means is they're going to take blood from your arm and they're going to test that to see what the defective gene is in your blood. Now, at the time, I didn't know this, and I still, up until researching this video, I had no idea what this was for. But basically, when they sent this, they'd already diagnosed me effectively without telling me with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. But this just tells you which gene is defective so they can tell you what type you have. For example, I have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease 1A. There is also another type of test which I didn't get done if they're really struggling to find out what type you have, or if they're really not sure what it is, which is a nerve biopsy, where I assume they take a small cut of nerve. I've only ever had a biopsy when I had a tumour in my shoulder, and obviously they just went in with local anaesthetic and chopped a tiny little bit off to check it. I imagine it'll be something similar for the nerve biopsy, but I'm afraid I haven't had that done. So you might have to check out other people on YouTube here, or sort of have a look at that on Google, because I found information about it on the NHS website here in the UK. So finally, after all that, I got referred to a different neurologist who dealt with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease in Newcastle, which is where I live, thankfully. We have a big science centre here called the Life Centre, and basically there is a genetic sort of centre within a centre, I guess, at this Life Centre because they do a lot of science stuff within that, and they're linked to my hospital. So I got sent there to see this neurologist. And basically she assumed I knew I had CMT because she kind of went, right, Sam, so you've got CMT, and basically this is what we're going to test you for today, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what? I've got what? Because she really just assumed I already knew. But this was when I finally found out, and it took 23 years, basically. I've been seeing some variety of medical professionals since I was 2 years old, and this was when I was 23, so I guess technically 21 years. But it took 23 years for me to finally get my Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease diagnosis. So that was pretty shocking. And one thing I'm going to say to you now is, it might be scary, or you might be afraid, but you need to know that nobody, as far as I'm aware, has ever died of Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. As you get older, it can start to affect your lungs and your throat, and you can maybe have breathing problems, but that can all be dealt with, and you will not die from Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. If you've seen my other couple of videos, you'll know my situation and how I get on, and I'm still reasonably healthy. Obviously, walking is a huge issue for me, and I can't do that so good. But overall, I live a pretty happy life, and I take some medication to help me deal with a lot of the pain, but other than that, I'm pretty good. Now, you might be scared when you get diagnosed, but you just need to take your time with it. The medical professionals who you're dealing with, if you have been diagnosed, will be more than happy to talk you through it, especially if you deal with someone like I had, who had dealt with other people who have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. Not only that, but there is a lot of information online. I live in the UK, so all the information I've spoke of today has been about sort of things I dealt with here in Britain, and obviously the National Health Service, which is a free service here in Britain. And they have a website which details a lot of different things about Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. And I imagine as you've watched this video, you probably know there are quite a few of us here on YouTube who have dealt with CMT ourselves. And there are other people apart from me you can watch. I have 2 videos, which I'll post either up in the cards or down in the description, about my overall experience with CMT and a little update for how I am this year. So you can watch those if you want to know more. But also the key thing that I'll say to you is talk to people about it. I know it can be hard to talk about disability, but disability should really be normalized. I very rarely shut up about it in my circle of friends, and they're probably sick of hearing about it. But at the end of the day, it's something I have to deal with every single day of my life. It's something that's going to come into conversation because literally everything I do, from recording this video and having a sore back and pain and having to set all this stuff up, from obviously other much more difficult things like showering and going out and about, I'm dealing with that disability. Talk about it. Don't feel like you should ever shut up about it. You don't have to. It's something you're dealing with. You deserve to talk about it. But it will also help you get out there and normalize it within yourself. Like, I have my CMT now, and there are millions of people all over the world who have never heard of CMT. And obviously that's totally understandable. It's a somewhat rare disease and 1 in 2,500 people. But I talk about it so much now that when someone says they haven't heard of it, it almost makes me think, how can you not have heard of it, Because I have to deal with it all the time. But you just need to talk to people, and it will really help you just to normalize it and not worry about it as much. But you deserve to think about it, okay? You deserve to deal with it. So don't let anyone tell you, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, sure, there's nothing. It's not, you're not disabled or anything else. And another thing to mention on that note is, just because you haven't had a clinical diagnosis does not mean that you might not have CMT. You can still say, I have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. The symptoms, which are online, and I'll post a link potentially in the description below to talk about that links to symptoms, because I have already spoke about them in previous videos. If you have a lot of those symptoms, there is a very good chance you're going to have Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. There are some that are pretty much unique to CMT. So you'll know you don't need to have a clinical diagnosis to have CMT, and you don't need to have a clinical diagnosis to consider yourself disabled. And that's important, I think, because a lot of people, I'm on Tumblr quite a lot, which I know isn't the best website for these sort of things. However, it is quite handy because there are a lot of people on there with CMT and other disabilities who talk about it openly like I do. And there are a lot of people on there who worry that they don't qualify as disabled because they either they don't get any disability money perhaps, or they haven't been declared as disabled by government in that kind of way. But that doesn't mean you're not. It just means that you may not have jumped through all the hoops you have to deal with government like that, and they also might not have a clinical diagnosis. Not everybody can do that. It's okay for me here in the UK because it's free, but in the US I could never have afforded the care and the sort of neurologists and stuff and the people like that I've seen. Anyway, if you have any questions whatsoever, just drop them down in the comments below. I'm on YouTube all the time. I'm on my computer all the time. And I'm always talking to people about CMT. And I'll happily answer any questions you may have assuming I know the answer, but I can point you in the right direction. There is also a CMT Society that you can check out online. I think it's just cmt.org.org. And there's a lot of information on there, and you can even join the society and sort of get a magazine monthly. I do that. But definitely feel free to drop any questions in the comments. You can also follow me on my social networks, which I will post here. I'm a musician first, so a lot of my handles are music-based. I'm Sam Bosworth Music on Facebook. I'm Bosworth_music on Twitter. And I'm Dr. Bozzy B on Instagram. But that's just the way it goes. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Like I say, any questions, drop them in the comments. If you like this video, please do like it down below because it really helps me out. And also don't forget to subscribe. I don't know which way this is going to be. Because I am posting a lot more videos now, especially in the new year. I'm feeling a bit better at the minute and I'm trying to get as much out as I can. I also post music videos, so do expect them to pop up in your sub box. But if you're not into them, don't click on them. Thanks again, guys. Bye.